Thanks for staying here. Now, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has assured government will do everything possible to grow the economy. In his budget presentation to Parliament on Thursday, dubbed a simple budget, the minister outlined a number of projects government intends to implement to accelerate economic growth. Now, Mr. Ofori-Atta pledged government's resolution to abolish the 1% special import levy, as well as the 17.5% VAT NHIL tax on financial services and selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. Now, he also said government will abolish the 17.5% VAT NHIL tax on domestic airline tickets and the 5% VAT NHIL tax on real estate sales. These, he said, will ensure equal opportunities for all. Here are some excerpts.
We are also determined to tackle the systemic abuse in the exemptions regime. There shall be a comprehensive review of the regime on import duty exemptions and tax reliefs with a view to eliminating abuses and improving efficiency in the application of these incentives. To this end, the review will cover, among others, the following exemptions and tax reliefs as a matter of urgency: import duties, taxes and levies payable by MDAs and other government departments, import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers and contractors executing projects and contracts in the country, import duty on all forms of taxes and levies payable by employees, directors and senior officials of both domestic and foreign companies, suppliers and contractors executing projects in the country, import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by both domestic and foreign companies and investors doing business in the country, and import duties on all forms of taxes and levies payable by non-governmental and charity organizations. With this budget, abolish the 1% special import levy. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on financial services. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. Initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery. We will initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery for production within the context of the ECOWAS Common External Tariff Protocol. We will abolish the 70.5% of domestic airline tickets. We will abolish the 5% VAT on real estate sales. Mr. Speaker, we will abolish excise duty on petroleum. Mr. Speaker, we will reduce the special petroleum tax rate from 70.5% to 15%. We shall abolish levies imposed on Kaya by local authorities. As part of our commitment to improve access to education at all levels, government will implement the comprehensive free public senior high school program, starting with the 2017-2018 academic year. Mr. Speaker, adequate provision have been made for the funding of this monumental social intervention program, which is set to begin in September 2017 from the ABFA and other domestic revenue sources. Mr. Speaker, we will initiate discussions with all stakeholders interested in the performance and excellence of their senior high schools in their communities. Parents, school alumni, religious organizations, the diaspora, and they'll be encouraged to establish a funding mechanism to support high schools of their choice. This will reinforce community involvement in governance and improve the quality of education in our senior high schools.
But how realistic are these projections? Let's have a discussion on this, and I'm joined in the studio by economist Professor Godfred Boppin. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. And well, it's a day after the budget was read, and obviously a lot of discussion on it. And the NPP administration has called this a budget of hope. Do you feel same?
I think that largely so. It's a budget that reflects reality, whilst a signal hope to the economy and all stakeholders. But I think that it will take a little bit of a while before it actually reflects in the pockets of people, even though some of the specific interventions may have a marginal effect on people's incomes, expenditure, and all of that. But I want to believe that it's a budget that manages a trade-off between the reality of today and then where we want to go in terms of our future, in terms of growth, job creation, and all of that, because the economy is facing serious challenges. So what you have to be able to do is for your budget to mirror that challenges to some extent, whilst you also try to create space to accommodate the many interventions in terms of the growth inspired policies that they talked about. So, and you also find that because of the way our governance architecture is, the budget largely reflects what they said they would do in their manifesto, okay, even though it is not possible to achieve all of that within 1 year. And if you also see, the budget is actually a build-up from what we have seen in the time past, because it has to draw inspiration from the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda 2, which is ending this year, before a new one is actually, a new framework is also developed, so which informs fiscal policy prescriptions and all of that. So there is some element of acknowledgement that some work has been done in the past, and therefore we are building on that, revising and all of that. So I think that largely is their first budget, and therefore you want to be able to give them that room and the benefit of the doubt that will be done. But we also have to understand what a budget is, because it's just a budget. At best, it's good intentions, and at this stage, we don't want to mistake good intentions for accomplishment, because you want to be able to, beyond presentation of the budget, presentation, that is just like 10% of the work. You want to be able to have the right implementation strategy to translate all the projections and all of that into actuals. And there you realize that it's beyond the Minister of Finance. You will then need everybody, including you and I, ministers, ministries, agencies, departments, everybody doing their part of the process and making sure that revenue collection agencies, there's honesty, there's integrity across the board. Without that, it will just remain.
But you still feel hopeful with this budget. But let's talk about this. When you get onto social media, a lot of people have called it the budget of abolishment, if you could put it that way. There's been a promise, like you say, this is just a plan, and we shouldn't consider it as an accomplishment to cut down on a lot of taxes, and some are actually being scrapped fully. Are we not losing a lot of money for that?
We are. But you also have to ask yourself, what is it that we are losing? We were losing ultimately with those taxes. That's a trade-off. Okay, so it is not always good to see the eye of society's progress through taxes. Okay, you just can't tax everything beyond a certain point, because the taxes impose restrictions also on the growth drivers of the economy. And if you impose those taxes together with the fiscal consolidation that we're doing, and the fiscal consolidation, we're doing mix of it, expenditure based and then revenue enhancement, and then the pace has been front loaded. That itself also imposes further costs on the economy and restrict the growth drivers of the economy. So what they sought to do was to ease the restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy, so which will mean that government will lose something today, but what they are losing is a gain to the private sector or individuals. Individuals will now respond in one way or the other to those incentives by also increasing their productive activities, and then that may ultimately enhance the cash flow generation capacity of the economy, and the money would come back. But you also realize that even though the MPP did remove some of the taxes and revise, they were very smart by looking at other alternatives.
Yeah, but,
so our revenue actually increased, compared to the fiscal outturn for 2016. So that is not to suggest that just by, because after all, how much were we getting from these taxes, VAT on financial services?
All right,
and
Prof. So let me
yeah.
just help with the specifics. It will cost us about 600 million Ghana cedis to scrap these taxes. And the finance minister, well, he says that they hope to review some exempt taxes of some multinationals who are into importation, and they hope to get 1 billion Ghana cedis out of this. Now, is this realistic, and how can it be done?
It's realistic. Who said it? It was the Minister of Finance. So what do? We hold him to it and hope that he gets to it. Because available evidence from the Tax Justice Network do suggest that Ghana loses $2.27 billion, not cedis, $2.27 billion through tax exemptions alone, which presupposes that these multinationals are in tax-paying position and they are not paying the taxes. Not that they are just dodging, probably through the legal system and all of that. So they will review some of them, engage them. Beyond that, there is also about transfer pricing, that we are losing so much, illicit financial flows and all of that. So if we're able to block all the leakages in the revenue envelope, we may be able to even achieve more by reducing these taxes, because we could actually make more gains. Beyond that, there's a new talk in town in the development literature, which is beyond just collecting more revenue. As a country, we also have to learn to achieve more with less. How do we, with the limited resources that we have, how do we achieve more with it? And here, I'm talking about efficiency. Okay, so if we don't explore efficiency, then it doesn't matter how much revenue we are able to generate. Okay, it means that waste will be more. And I'm very happy the minister talked about, or the government is talking about the Fiscal Council, okay, the Financial Stability Council and all of that. Beyond that, units, agencies that depend on government in terms of subventions, transfer and all of that, we have to look at it comprehensively and ensure that there is value for money in whatever that we do, not only in terms of the central government, but quasi-government institutions as well, that we all explore efficiency, because there is nowhere in this world where we can have more money than you actually needed. Resources are limited everywhere, but the idea is that how do we explore the alternative uses of our scarce resources? So if we are saying that we are doing free senior high school, let's explore efficiency in that area. And I want to believe that going forward, if government is able to give a very good account of how they use our money, and this free senior high school is clearly ironed out on a more sustainable basis, then it shouldn't be difficult for me when government one day comes to me and says that I want to increase taxes, let's say on my income, to let's say 40%, because I'm no longer going to pay school fees for my children and all of that. Because in other countries, taxes on personal income could go as high as 57%. Then they know that government is going to provide ABC. I don't have to spend money. I don't have to save towards that. So if government is asking for more, there is incentive to comply with that. Okay, but over the years, governments in our part of the world have largely been inefficient. Corruption here, corruption there, and all of that. If we do less of those things, even though it's not possible to eradicate corruption, we are not there yet, but we should be able to reduce it to the barest minimum.
All right, Prof. So the finance minister also said government will abolish excise duty on petroleum and reduce a special petroleum tax from 17 to 15%. Is this also realistic?
I think so. We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the reason is that if you look at the energy sector, I think that we are overburdened. Okay, and I think there's real reason and incentive to review our tax regime. Okay, because we tend to burden the faithful few. And the more we do that, you see, for instance, if you talk about fuel, it's an input cost. The more taxes you impose in that area, you are increasing the cost of production and ultimately passing that on to consumers. Okay, but beyond that, you see, because of institutional inefficiencies, the transmission mechanism itself is not that effective. So, for instance, how do we ensure that if we remove these taxes, the gains are passed on onto the final consumer? If taxes on spare parts are removed, how do we ensure that ultimately it gets to the consumer and all of that? So all this policing and the tightening the loose ends would have to be done so that at the end the economy respond in a manner that we had assumed with all this review and abolition of taxes.
Now, talking about abolition of taxes, this one got a lot of stakeholders in this particular industry very excited yesterday. That has to do with the abolishment of duty on importation of spare parts. Now, let's talk about it. It's a major issue now because a lot of critics of this particular one have come out to say that this country may become a transit point, you know, for people in neighboring countries, like it happens with Ghana and Togo. People travel all the way to Togo just to, you know, get their vehicles off their ports because they're duty-free. Is this a major issue, and what do you think about it with all these freebies, as it were?
Yeah, of course. Every policy will have its own merits and demerits, the downside and all of that. Government must have a plan in place to make sure that these things are not done on a large scale, so that it would defeat the very purpose for which we do these things. So that's what they have to do. They have to tighten the loose ends, whatever people would want to take advantage of that. They should be able to resolve that, and I think that's why they are in government. So I'm not scared. That should not be the reason why certain interventions shouldn't be done. What we have to do is to make sure that we are able to overcome those constraints and make sure that the full benefits and the intentions behind these policy interventions are actually realized and made to benefit Ghanaians.
Well, other critics say this budget is populist and scanty on detail for major projects. For example, the free senior high school. Now, they say that, for example, the minister mentions 400 million Ghana cedi that has been that will be allocated for the first term for first year students whose number they don't even know. What do you say about all those criticisms?
I want to believe that they did some data collection on that, contacting senior high schools and all of that. So I will not go along that line. I want to believe at this stage, I mean, they are credible enough to have done all this thing, and I want to believe that they knew what they were talking about. Okay, so in terms of the budget being scanty, I think that maybe people should take their time and read the entire budget, not just the summary that the minister presented, because the budget itself is over 200 pages. I mean, it took me a while to finish it, and the more you read it, the more you get the details. Okay, so the summary, as the name suggests, you may not get all the details there, but when you look at the actual budget, the details are there. If you look at the annual budget funding amount, that has been rationalized, quite different from the way the NDC used to spend, do the allocation with the annual budget funding amount. The NPP has changed that, and part of that is going into the funding of the free senior high school, health insurance, and all of that. So I think that a little bit of the details, or more of that, are actually in the budget, and the more people read it, the more they will get answers to some of these things. Then in that case, there are certain comments that clearly they are avoidable. The part that you could also talk about is the fact that, I mean, reviewing these taxes, abolishing these taxes were highly predictable, because at the time they introduced them, we knew they were not efficient. They were not the right way to go.
So do you agree there were nuisance taxes?
Of course. We didn't agree with VAT on financial services. Intermediation is not that deep in this country. Why do you tax the channel for increasing financial intermediation in the system? Then it means that you are shifting the burden ultimately onto those who participate in that channel, and that is not effective enough. So we knew the vice president, when he was in opposition, Dr. Baumia, talked about all this. So they were very, very predictable that they were going to do these things. And there's nothing wrong in doing what you say you were going to do once you believe that is the way to go. So we all do agree that surely some of these taxes could have been, I mean, the NDC government could have spared themselves certain embarrassment if they had probably thought through it in a certain way at that time. I want to believe that they had their own reason to introduce those taxes. Remember, right from the 2012 election, the physical slippages were just unbearable. So with the IMF program, talk about fiscal consolidation that sought to neutralize those effects within the shortest possible time. So the idea was, let's balance the books, let's balance the books. So we had to sacrifice growth, we had to sacrifice our comfort and all of that, just to keep to the program objectives. Then we realized that we missed quite a number of them as well. So it's just because of how we have managed our economy over the years, okay? Because as we speak, if you look at the 2017 budget, it's just an admission that Ghana has not fully recovered from the election excesses of 2012, and we had to go into another election. So if you see the 2017 budget, you'll find that there are allocations in terms of government expenditure, which is just meant to cater for arrears from last year.
Now, Prof, talking about arrears now, it will cost us some amount of about 13.9 billion Ghana cedis to use in, sorry,
in paying
interest on our debts.
On our debt, yeah.
But the whole budget is about 58 billion Ghana cedis. Do you think, with if you do the mathematics, there is enough fiscal space to, explore all these, well, bold initiatives and projects that this MPP government is promising?
There isn't. That's why in economics they refer to something called rigidity. The space is not there. The space is not there. If you look at our tax revenue, actually, okay, it's not even up to 50 billion, okay, and we are spending close to 14 billion cedis, okay, just to service our debt, just debt servicing alone. Another 16-point-something billion cedis goes into wages and salaries. Okay, so if you put that together with statutory transfers, that's almost 90-something% of what we are able to generate in terms of tax revenue. Then it means that there's very limited space left. So, and you know what? This won't change. It's not the MPP's fault. It's not in the NDC's fault, whatever. This is Ghana today.
Then whose fault is it?
Let me put it this way.
There should have been something that caused it.
Precisely, but you are unable to hold anybody accountable for all of that. So we'll say this is Ghana's own fault. And that won't change. That level of rigidity won't change just because there's a change in government. Because the idea is that the budget must mirror the reality. You can't do anything about your debt servicing. We are not going the way of a champion where he said that I hope you understand that. So you have to be able to mirror the reality. And whilst you do so, begin to also explore other avenues to see if you can create some space. And that is why they are rationalized in terms of, if you look at allocations, statutory and the rest of them, there will be some realignment here and there to create some space and all of that. So what it means is that going forward, this government should focus more on exploring efficiency. That's the way to go. We have to learn to do more with less, because we can have more to do more. We have to do more with less. Let's explore efficiency, value for money. Let's give account for every CD anybody receives from government, whether from government subventions, whether ministries, department, agencies, or whatever. Let's make sure that we explore efficiency. With that, I want to believe that we should be able to.
Now, you saying that reminds me of the finance minister himself saying that with 5 loaves of bread
and then 2 fish.
They're hoping to do all of this within the time that they have to. But finally, before you go, let's talk about, for many people, yes, the big jargons in economics don't really bother them. They want to find out how this will reflect in their pockets. For example, the reduction of public lighting levy, the reduction of the national electrification scheme. Someone would want to find out, would this affect, how much I pay for electricity, and domestic airlines, and how much I'll pay for medicine when I go to the pharmacy, and how soon will it be? How soon should we expect, if there's any reflection at all?
I'm sure as soon as the Parliament passes the appropriation bill, I mean, some should be immediate, but it might not be that significant enough. But the good news is that for a government with this level of challenges, it's yet thinking about Ghanaians and making this intervention. What it means is that the government is actually sacrificing something in order for you and I to have our comfort today. So probably there may be some reduction, maybe in terms of your electricity bill or whatever. It might not be that significant, but it's a good point to start from. Then we can ask for more and hope that whatever they generate, they are able to use it to expand the economy. Then going forward, we always look forward to something, but we must also do our part. Okay, so, but in terms of the full impact of the budget and all of that, it will take a while before it actually reflects in our pocket, because we are looking at solving the macro issues before it trickles down.
Can you give a rough estimation so people at home can know that, well, it will take this amount of time before maybe I pay less for electricity?
Probably I want to believe that given the reduction in terms of street lights, the public and the rest of them, it shouldn't be that long for it to take effect in terms of the next pricing by PURC or so. So that should be done. That should be possible.
You don't want to give any specifics. You're playing safe.
I don't want to give that because it's not within my control.
Sure.
Beyond that, there are other things that they have to be able to put in place to make sure that all these things actually bear fruits. But you have to understand that given the challenges that we have, we will need more than 3-4 years to make sure that things are actually realigned to make the economy much more user-friendly, business-friendly, and all of that. So next year's budget should reinforce whatever reforms, whatever intervention, the following year, the subsequent year. Then once we are consistent at it, then you begin to see that the benefits are becoming more real and real.
Thank you very much for your time, Professor Godfrey Bokpin.
God bless you.
He's an economist, and we've been discussing the budget, the 2017 budget. Now, the central bank is set to release the new 5 Ghana cedi denomination, which is to mark the 60th anniversary of Ghana's independence from British rule in 1957. Now, the new note, which would be in circulation from March 7, has some key distinctive security features that are aimed at protecting it from counterfeit, and they are also to make the note accessible and recognizable by persons who are visually impaired. The note depicts the image of Ghanaian missionary and educationist James Eman Kwegyiri Agri, credited for being one of the apostles of education in the then Gold Coast. We go live to a briefing currently ongoing about the new notes.
This is reserved for last, and because it's also coming to perform a function, we've now come to the climax or the highlights to this program, and that's the unveiling of the banknotes. And we're privileged to have the governor of the Central Bank of Ghana, Dr. Isaac with us. Well, I guess you're going to be the first to see this, and it's going to be my first time as well seeing this. So let me thank you all for being here to help us commemorate this special event of our 60 years in existence, actually older than Ghana's event, because the bank came to be on 4 March 1957. And back Ghana became Ghana.
Well, so you saw there in your shots the central bank unveiling the new 5 Ghana cedi note to mark 60 years after independence. There are live shots coming to you as they're unveiling that particular note. They are cutting the tape now, and they will show us exactly what it's going to look like. But some of the information we have is going to have the image of Kwegyiri Agri, who is believed to be an apostle of education during the Gold Coast period, and it also has some features that will make the note recognizable to visually impaired persons. So as you can see, well, it's taken quite a while, but pretty soon you will see that new 5 Ghana cedi note. The note will be in circulation from March 7. And as I've mentioned, it has some key distinctive security features, well, aimed at protecting it from counterfeits, and they would also make the note well. So we can see the new 5 Ghana cedi note.
With Dr. Agri's portrait on the front. He was a handsome man who accomplished a lot, for someone like him to have journeyed over to across the Atlantic and achieved so much in America, and decided to come back to Ghana to help lay the foundation for education and national development, Ghana as we have it today, largely as a result of some of the contributions of Dr. Agri. those is powerful sayings. For example, the one that says, when you educate a woman, you educate the nation. I think that's truly powerful. But today is evidence that after so many years, that those countries that include their women in development are the ones that are doing much better, and there are others who haven't. The conversation around that and the debate is settled now. It's no longer a debate. Women are very important, perhaps more important than men in national development. And Dr. Agri, envisioned that several years ago. But to also say that when you play just the black keys of a piano, you may produce some sort of music. If you play the white keys only, you may produce some sort of music. But together, it makes better music. I think that today is evidence in the national unity that we have, that as a united country, we can do better and continue to lead the continent. So you see the kind of man that he was. Many, many years before a lot of us were born, a lot of you. I was born in 1927, the same year as you. Today we are living it, and we thought we should celebrate this man. And when we celebrate him, it inspires a lot of us today to do even more. So the idea is inspiration to get us to sacrifice so that our country can continue to grow and be a better place for those who are yet unborn. It's a great country. And when we follow Dr. Agri's path, we shall keep it a great country and the #1 leading star of the continent. Incidentally, Achimota is also celebrated their 60 years. 90 years, sorry, older than the country, 90 years. And the country is also celebrating 60 years of existence. It's really timely to celebrate people like him. So thank you. When you turn the back, yes, the back, you see a rig. The rig is here. And I did not say much about it because it tells you where we are today. Come through with cocoa carrying us, gold carrying us, and now oil is also carrying us. And I think it's important that we also recognize where we are today and where the direction that we are taking. So we thought a picture, a portrait of the rig, it's worth celebrating. That Ghana has come far. So this is the commemorative 5 cedi note that we have, and one that hopefully I'll get to have one of it in my pockets. I will exchange on Tuesday. I'm seeing it for the first time. I saw its specimen copy before. So I'm happy to be seeing it with you all, and you joining me to unveil it. Thank you very much.
Well, that was Dr. Abdul Nashiru Sahaku, governor of the bank, central bank. Now he was unveiling, or he has unveiled, the new 5 Ghana cedi note, which comes along with a photo of Kwejiri Agri and some distinct features which will make the cedi, that particular 5 cedi note, recognizable to visually impaired persons. You're watching Joy News Desk with me, Benis Abubedu.